Most people are unaware of the warning signs that things are not okay deep inside as they chalk it off to stress. All they know is something hits and they're unable to shake it off as well as they used to. But they think that just because that episode passed, they think it's over. But little do they realize it's simply the calm before the next storm. But this time, it'll be worse than before. And they're becoming more reactive, more unsettled, more unsure of themselves. Almost like they're starting to lose it, and people, well, they're beginning to wonder what's going on.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Whoa. Did you feel that?
Danny, would you turn that down? All right, saute mushrooms and onions and herbs and butter. Danny, please turn it down. Thank you. All right, reduce 1 cup of wine. Do I have a cup? I don't know. I thought we were having an earthquake.
Chill out, Mom. We don't live in LA anymore.
Doctors, well, they'll call it anxiety or depression or even panic disorder. Is there another way to understand it and deal with it? We'll look at that next on this edition of Journey to Healing.
Welcome to Journey to Healing. Do you find yourself discouraged, troubled, in need of healing, but not sure where to turn? John Euler, a licensed professional counselor, is here to help. John has more than 25 years of professional experience helping people deal with the issues that keep them emotionally and spiritually stuck. There is help. There is hope. There is a God who loves you and wants to help you find peace and strength. And John Euler is here to help you find that on this edition of Journey to Healing.
Well, hello everyone. My name's John Euler. This is Journey to Healing, and I'm glad you're joining us. We're doing an in-depth dive into those issues that prevent healing, those issues that will cause us to remain active in our dysfunction, those issues that will cause the earthquakes in our life to continue. So welcome. This is Journey to Healing, and for a look at previous podcasts, I recommend you go to our site at SurvivorSupport.net. Under podcasts, we're actually doing an extended series. The overall umbrella series is grief and loss. But in order to heal through grief and loss, you need to be able to bring the current day situations down to a low ebb so you can attend to things in your past if you have them. And again, how do you know? How do you know if there are things that need to be attended to? Well, just like the intro of the program showed, people that find themselves starting to become emotionally reactive, they start to feel things down inside, and before you know it, those things are increasing. Last time we referenced, for instance, an underwater kind of explosion, things under the surface that are building, and before you know it, they explode. So we referenced a recent test on the USS Gerald Ford, and that provided enough of a word picture, as it were, to show you there really are things under the surface at times that have caused issues. Underwater explosions, as it were. And we looked at an example from Eunice and Mama on the old Carol Burnett show. but I showed the following clip. That is an example of an internal explosion that is on the surface. In fact, look at the little boat just floating along. It still kept going. But have you ever found yourself feeling that way? That all of a sudden, before you know it, you have all this energy, all this tension, all this stuff come up, and people the poor people near you or near us. As a matter of fact, let's find the little boat. You'll see him over in the left-hand corner. Poor little boat. There he is in the midst. So you can imagine, they're just sitting with somebody and it's like, what the heck happened? So there was this massive explosion, apparently out of the blue. And so if you stuff things long enough, that's what will happen. But those explosions will continue to get bigger. So we have looked at what are the indications of those. For those that are familiar with psychology or psychological terms, you might have heard the word depression. You might have heard the word anxiety, panic disorder. How about compulsions? Addictions, well, those are habits that have taken hold and affected brain chemistry. But if someone has to use mood-altering chemicals, then there's probably something going on. The categories of chemicals, by the way, can be broken down into two. Things that'll get you up and things that'll get you down. If you need to get up, as it were, the question is, what's going on? Why has life become less than what it could be and should be? You've lost your natural motivation for life, your natural creativity, your natural vim and vigor. So you're needing to get up, as it were. For those that just need to get down, that reach for alcohol or sedatives, the question is, what's happening in your life? And what has happened to where you need to actually just sort of mellow out? A lot of times anger is under the surface, and generally speaking, it's all anger. Virtually all the stuff we deal with, no matter how it's coming out, either exploding or imploding, it's going to be anger. We've talked about how adrenaline is described as anxiety. Anxiety is really adrenaline because a part of me is in the fight-flight syndrome. I'm now producing a lot of adrenaline into my bloodstream, but that's because a part of me feels backed into a corner or I'm losing control, neither of which positions I should ever be put in. So I'm being negatively impacted by something. Therefore, I'm not able to have a voice. I'm not able to push my boundaries back out, not able to change the situation so I feel helpless. That's where the adrenaline is going to kick in. And depression is, the vast majority of the time, it's anger pushed down. All my energy is going to keep a lid on something. You know, that explosion. Can you imagine partway through that explosion what it would take to push that down? As a matter of fact, let's look at the explosion again. Stopping it right there. What would that take to stop it and then push it back down? So it's starting to come up. As a matter of fact, you see the little boat right in the middle? So somebody's sitting on something and up comes, let me see if, oh gosh, out of the blue. So anyways, I mean, none of this is funny, but the little guy in the poor boat, but the Navy, they're gung-ho for that. So again, there's going to be indicators and your body will absorb all of that, all of the emotions, and that's why oftentimes doctors will give out various types of inventories or assessments for the degree of stress. What is stress? It's simply an accumulation of emotions that haven't been able to be kept current. So if you've gone through things for a long period of time, you have been stuffing things. You've been what they call gunny sacking. You've been stuffing them in a gunny sack. You've been pushing them in a trap door, down into a trap door. You've been shoving them in a closet. So what happens is something comes along at a certain point in time. It could be the convergence of things. What starts to happen? That table like that guy that was just working, and all of a sudden he starts to feel this earthquake. We start to feel indicators that something isn't going on. That mother, she was feeling indicators. So we need to attend to those things, or of course our bodies are certainly going to feel it and we're going to be negatively impacted. So we've looked at a number of things that cause that kind of stress, that kind of earthquake in time. And ultimately, inevitably, it comes down to people. And it comes down to probably people that we might not be needing to deal with, or are not dealing with people properly. What kind of people? Really selfish people are the kind that typically will do that, meaning will create that kind of response and reaction because we have not been keeping current with emotions, we've been stuffing things, and oftentimes that comes from years of dealing with certain kinds of people, and it's the straw that breaks the camel's back, and before you know it, now they get possibly years worth of stuff. They may get stuff that isn't even theirs. Now we're just unleashing, and then we're at fault. So you're not responsible for what you're given. You are responsible for what you do with it. And it meaning our issues, our stuff. One way to view it in Galatians 6 is Paul used the idea of a knapsack, an old-fashioned knapsack with the pole and the bandana that carries your items. And he says everybody should carry their own load. So the Greek word for load is bandana. We get into trouble when we violate that, when we either have too many or too few. So everybody needs to have just one. What is in that bandana? It is from 3,000 years ago, Proverbs chapter 1 and chapter 2, it is doing what is right, just, and fair. That is my responsibility, and it has to do with treating people in an emotionally responsible fashion. If I don't, I'm taking my responsibility to do that, and I've placed it on them. I have been emotionally irresponsible. I need to go back and own that. We saw that in Matthew chapter 5, that I cannot dump on people. I need to re-own my stuff, and that is actually 1 John 1:9. If we confess our sins, what does that mean? The Greek word for confess means to say the exact same thing as. I need to go to that person, acknowledge what happened, re-own my stuff, and then begin to implement changes. Or if someone has dumped on us, what's required at that point? What's required is speaking the truth in a responsible fashion. Speak the truth in love. And again, we spent a number of times or programs in the past, and again, you can access those on SurvivorSupport.net under podcasts, and we go into details about what happens when relationships get out of balance. They get out of balance because somebody has either too many or too few knapsacks, and it's typically too many. Those that have too few knapsacks typically aren't watching a program like this. So it's the ones that are on the receiving end of the dumpor, so the dumpee, or in one program we called it the super duper pooper scooper, that has to go around cleaning up after everybody, trying to make it okay, so they're not being honest for fear of, and we also dealt with that in another program. So they're trying to keep the peace, and meanwhile, all these explosions are going on the inside of them, and what do they feel on the surface? They feel the earthquakes. So what's the answer to all of those earthquakes and explosions? It is making changes, ultimately setting limits. It's starting by being honest. So we're looking at, and we transitioned to starting to assess the issue of boundaries, or looking at the issue of boundaries, and I recommend some previous podcasts for that. Now we're looking at what prevents the implementation of boundaries. We've looked at a number of things previously. We spent about a program and a half looking at those things that will hinder that. The implementation of boundaries, primarily mistaken notions. There's a lot of things that will hinder me from actually being able to set limits when I need to, and therefore I get stuck in a relationship or stuck in interacting with a relationship, or the extent to which I am interacting in a relationship that is improper. And so I'm staying in relationship with someone that a couple of podcasts ago, a number of them, we talked about a pig. That's not name calling. That is an assessment. It takes discernment. So we drew that out of Matthew chapter 7, verse 6. So we went into detail. And you can actually take the warthog assessment. That is on one of the podcasts. So I recommend that to really discern how much of a pig we might have become or how much of a pig somebody else is. And we are called not to deal with pigs. Why? Because natural consequences will come into play, meaning they will play out towards us. So if we deal with people we shouldn't be dealing with, they will trample our pearls, as the verse goes, right? They'll take our time, effort, energy, resources, trust, everything that's important to us, and they will treat it as nothing. And that's bad enough, but they won't stop there. They will add insult to injury. And the only thing you can do at that point is you need to bring about distance in one way or another. So how do you do that? How do you implement boundaries? Well, we're continuing with that. What are some of the things that are going to hinder that? So in order for me to feel free and free enough to implement boundaries, I need to feel like I have the right to do that. We looked at that in the previous podcast. I need to have internal rebar. So once I'm ready to, there still can be a couple of things that can hinder that, and better not start the process and not be able to follow it through, because a selfish pig will only gain strength and power if you try to implement boundaries. So that's another way of saying if you try to confront too soon out of your hurt, the selfish pig is going to have a heyday with you and will cause you to be the reactive one. Genuine boundaries, when they're implemented, they are not implemented in a reactive state, in an emotionally reactive state. Okay? They are implemented in a polite but firm way. They are rooted and grounded in truth. And the work has to be done behind the scenes before I ever confront that person. So I cannot confront someone out of my hurt. That means I'm not healed yet. That means I am dependent upon how that other person is going to respond. And trust me, if they were going to respond properly, they probably already would have apologized. They themselves would have made changes. If in doubt, you're going to find out, right? You're going to begin to speak truth. But again, if you're dependent upon the cooperation of the person you're going to set boundaries with, you're done from the start. Why? Because they're probably not going to cooperate. They're going to look at you because you're trying to change the status quo. You're trying to change a good thing. You got a good thing going on. For who? Blood is thicker than water. Whose blood? So you should not expect a warm welcome. If there is a warm welcome, then that'll be right at the very outset. As you begin to discuss the issue, you'll get a warm reception, meaning you'll get a listening ear. You'll get somebody that's very receptive, and you'll know in about 2.5 seconds. But rare is the time. 99.9% of the time, it's not going to go in that direction. So you need to be prepared. You need to have that internal rebar, and you need to make sure that you really feel not just up to it, but you are able and you have the right. So we started looking at some of the final things that are going to cause me difficulty in establishing boundaries. At the end of last program, we talked about one of the issues is a confusion between guilt and shame. If you feel guilty for everything, don't think that person that you're going to have to set boundaries with, don't think they're not going to go for the jugular in a way. Don't think they're not going to throw stuff up to make you feel guilty. So if you're already prone to feeling guilty about stuff that you had no control over, then you're going to crumble, because they're going to come at you in 87 different ways, and they're going to try to get you to back off. They're going to try to get you to crumble or shut your mouth. So you need to be clear on the difference between what you are or are not responsible for, so that you can go in with resolve and a firm degree of rebar in your spine, so that when they start throwing the stuff up, and they will, because they'll first always appear shocked, and then they're going to go typically for the guilt card, producing guilt in us for how dare we do that to them. So they kind of do the martyr card next, like, I can't believe you're doing it. Well, how could you do this to me? Well, why would you say this? Then they're going to do the anger. Probably they're going to shift into anger. And after that, then they're going to start to do they're going to lob the emotional guilt grenades at you. So it's only a matter of time in this exchange that here it comes. So you'd better be clear within yourself whether or not you are guilty, whether or not you need to feel guilty. Okay, so the difference is this. The difference between guilt and shame is guilt is always situationally specific, and it's always tied to something you said or did, and thus there's something for which you can do or make amends. Okay, so true guilt is always tied to something specific. It is not nebulous. Shame, however, is nebulous. It's tied to your essence, meaning if you feel shame-based, you feel fundamentally flawed. Almost like you don't have the right to have your opinion. You find yourself apologizing for even breathing virtually. Okay, so shame is nebulous. It's tied to your essence and for which there's nothing you can do in terms of making amends and being restored. So it's important to know that God deals in specifics. Satan deals in generalities. Okay, God deals in conviction. Satan deals in condemnation. Conviction is always tied to something I have done, something tangible. Shame is nebulous. It's like a fog. That's why you can't get out of it and you can't get it off of you. So you have to know the difference. If you don't know the difference, trust me, the selfish pig is gonna blur that to get you to back off. Because if you feel guilty, then who are you? Why do you have the right to even start to change things? Because after all, look at all what you've done. I mean, that's where they're going to go. Okay, so if you want to know the difference, then ask God to help bring that to mind. As far as this, if you are guilty of something, then you need to go apologize. You need to go make amends. You need to do 1 John 1:9. Each of us do. But if I can't think of anything, then I can pray. I can ask God to connect my neurons and ask him to bring to mind anything that I've done. And in Matthew 5, it says he will, that if we're at the altar presenting our gift and we suddenly remember that we have been hurtful, so he'll do that. That's a prayer he loves to respond to and answer. Lord, have I done anything that has been hurtful? You don't think he'll respond to that? Of course he will. Why? Because it's been damaging to a relationship. It hasn't been right, just, or fair. So we can then go take care of it. But if after praying that prayer, now some of us don't even need to pray about it, right? If you know there's something that you need to go take care of, then you need to go take care of it. You don't even need to pray about it. But if in doubt and you can't think of anything specific, pray. It'll come to mind then. And it's really in the 12 steps. It is step 4. You do a searching and fearless moral inventory, which leads to what? It leads to making amends to the extent that it is possible. There are times that you can't make amends, either because you are not supposed to have contact with someone, okay? Then you do as much as you can do to the extent that you can do it. No more and no less, but then also don't go beyond that. So if there's an actual court order that says you can't contact a victim, then you can't do anything about that. But the best, the most, and the only thing you can do is the best, the most, and the only thing you can do. But those are a little more rare cases as far as the rest of your life. If it has to do with family, if it has to do with a former spouse, if you were the hurtful one, then it doesn't matter how many years it's been. You need to apologize. You need to own it. And a genuine apology makes no excuses. There's no justification or rationalization about it. It ends with a period. It does not have a comma. Well, I'm sorry for, but after, no. You put a period. And it has to be specific. It's not, well, okay, I'm sorry for everything I ever did. No. You have to name it. Why? Because you need to own it, you need to acknowledge it, and you need to honor your victim enough, or the person you negatively impacted, you need to honor that person enough to say the exact same thing about it that they do. If you were really hurtful, your apology needs to match the degree of hurt, and it'll show. So that's what John the Baptist called bringing forth fruits of repentance. So dealing with guilt, acknowledging any wrong, we have to do that. We have to approach someone that we've injured with brokenness and contrition and ask for forgiveness. Again, what happens if someone hasn't? Then they're not sorry. Do we need to forgive someone that has never been sorry? That's an impossibility. Not because it's beyond us as humans, and therefore it's going to take a work of God and to help us forgive. And in genuine cases, that's still probably true. But if someone has not confessed, they have not confessed for a reason, because they're not sorry. Therefore, they have not met the criteria by which they are eligible for forgiveness. And that's really important. We are to forgive when there is confession, when it's accompanied by genuine brokenness and contrition. It'll be really evident when someone is really sorry, and it will match the extent to which somebody was negatively impacted. So forgiveness, in order to be forgiven, and this is where it comes down to in preparation of setting boundaries. Some people might say, well, you know what? You might as well just drop it. Just forgive them. No, we need to find out, is it appropriate? Forgiveness is appropriate, and forgiveness fits where there has been confession. To confront, for instance, using that word, confront means to place in front of. That's where I'm bringing to someone else's attention what they have done. In the situations that are the most impactful, they already know. If in doubt, you bring it up. So that's confronting. That's, I go to my brother and I lay it out there. But we're talking about things that have been going on for years. We're talking about especially the things that will cause the earthquakes and cause the underwater explosions are things that have been going on for years, that have become habitual on the part of the person who's become a pig. That's why Jesus says, do not have anything to do with them. They have morphed into not just a pig, but also the other category, and they're synonymous actually, is a dog and a fool. We are not to deal with fools. 3,000 years ago, Proverbs chapter 26, 27, and 28 lays out what we should or should not be dealing with when it comes to fools. So we're talking that level. So trust me, they know. So the question is, what do? You have to be sure that there is nothing left on your part. So if you have something to confess, then you have to confess. But as far as, quote unquote, forgiving them without them asking for forgiveness, that is an impossibility because it can't be done because the person isn't asking for it and therefore they're not sorry. It is a really important distinction because if I forgive someone who's never asked for forgiveness, it's actually not forgiveness, but it is license. I'm now enabling them. I'm enabling them to do what? To continue. We have to be consistent with what God says. Forgiveness comes after there is confession, after there's brokenness and contrition. Without confession, there is no forgiveness because forgiveness is not possible because they're not asking for it. Another way of saying that is this. Does everybody get to go to heaven? No. 1 John 1:9 lays out the condition to go to heaven. In order to go to heaven, you have to be forgiven. Right? So Judas, trust me, Judas was not forgiven. Why wasn't he forgiven? He shed tears and then he hung himself. To the casual observer, that looks like, the worst. He just was in such pain that he couldn't handle it. No, that was self-absorbed pain. He was sorry for the consequences that were going to befall him, not for having done it, not for the impact that he had on Jesus. Okay, so true confession will be self-evident. It will match the offense. If there isn't confession, then there's not the brokenness. The person isn't asking for it. So they do not have a change of heart, and they will continue to do what they've been doing. And now I will simply empower them, because in their mind, how are they going to interpret that? Their ego is going to interpret, you not bringing anything up and moving towards them, meaning you're going to close that gap. There's supposed to be that gap. Actually, there's supposed to be a widening gap. You're going to close it, so now you're getting in the pig pen with them. Now you're in violation of what Jesus said. He said, do not do that. So what's driving you? Well, we need to figure out, we're not. Not according to what Jesus laid out. You are being driven by a misconception that is driving you to close the gap when Jesus said, don't do that. The only thing that's going to come from that is you're going to get hurt again. Why? Because the pig is still a pig. If you enable a pig, if you make it okay or make it pretend like it didn't happen, if you don't bring it up, you're in violation of, you're no longer speaking the truth in love. It's not iron sharpening iron, and you're not spurring one another on to love and good works. As a matter of fact, you're not even trusting the Lord with all your heart. You're leaning on your own understanding in all your ways. You're directing things, and therefore you're creating your own path. That's why it's not going well, and that's why you continue to have the earthquakes on the inside. And you don't need to have the earthquakes, because in one way or the other, if you have earthquakes going on, you're going to have to do something to manage those feelings, and it's usually through some form of self-anesthetizing. That's called sex, drugs, rock and roll, alcohol, sports, you name it. All the different kinds of compulsions and addictions. And with that, we will continue as far as implementing boundaries. How do we do that? What's involved on the other side of the break?
Are you or someone you know a survivor of abuse and wondering where to turn for trustworthy help and insight into the effects of such abuse? Ever wish you had access to a resource that could help you continue your progress in healing? SurvivorSupport.net is that resource. Developed by John Euler, a seasoned therapist with years of experience working with sexual abuse survivors, SurvivorSupport.net is a one-of-a-kind resource to help you understand the impact of abuse and to help you understand the nature of those who harmed you, in order to help you gain clarity and continue healing. If you are interested in speaking with John Euler about your situation, or in having John conduct a consultation or a training for your church or organization, SurvivorSupport.net serves as a convenient method of contacting him. Our program, Journey to Healing, is made possible through the generous donations of viewers like you. There are many opportunities and needs that Survivor Support is attempting to meet, and your monthly support or one-time gift would be extremely helpful as we seek to meet those needs and opportunities. Simply visit SurvivorSupport.net and you will see the link to donate on the homepage. We thank you.